Was your reviews good? Better than the one in The Guardian.
Nothing to do with me.
Why didn't you write that one?
Should I tell you the truth?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, this is how the things work like that. I was actually asked to do it. I was asked to review that album. And I said, well, I'm hosting an event with them in Leeds on Sunday. Would that be a conflict of interest? And they said, absolutely, yeah, right. It would be a conflict of interest. So they had to give it to someone else. But otherwise, I would have been down to review that album. So this event has scuppered my eulogy of the new album to match the one who put the downstairs in whenever it was, 93.
Well, I was going to say, actually, you know, you started the conversation about, you know, this whole thing about the band starting as a joke and ending up as this. You are one of the main reasons why it sort of transitioned from being a joke, because you're reviewing Melody Maker up the downstairs, which was a great review. It was like, oh shit, maybe I've got something here, you know, and I kind of began to take it seriously from that point on.
Apparently I got like criticism told off by the editor for writing nice things about it. Have you heard this before? Somebody told me that this evening. I thought, I've never heard that before. It's possible it may have happened and I've forgotten it, because that is exactly the sort of thing that would have happened.
You got criticised by who? The editor of Melody Maker?
Yes, for writing nice things about it.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me, because we were...
I mean, very unfashionable.
Well, it wasn't even that we were unfashionable, we were somehow out.
Yes.
You know, it was just like beyond the idea of unfashionable, fashionable. It was just so out of keeping. I mean, it was the era of Suede, Britpop, and it was just, Oasis were just about to emerge. And, you know, it couldn't have been more out of the zeitgeist, as it were.
That was probably why I liked it, and that's probably why a lot of other people liked it, because it was completely different to everything else that was around, and yet in a weird sort of way, it kind of tapped into everything else that was around. But it did it from so many conflicting or, you know, disparate places at once that you couldn't get a handle. I mean, I remember comparing you to the All, right. You know, at the same time as probably mentioned the P word, you know, which is prog, not punk. In that review, I'm sure I would have mentioned that word in there, or maybe I did. But you know,
well, I've always said that
stuff.
Porcupine Tree emerged about the same time as Radiohead. Radiohead, you know, almost eternally cool band, and us eternally uncool. The difference is, I came from a tradition of progressive conceptual rock. They came from the tradition of alternative independent music, and that seemed to make all the difference.
Yeah.
And so it's always been perception, you know, the sort of difference in the music may not be that different, but the perception couldn't be more different.
I think that's true, but you never hid your take. You never hid what you liked. I mean, I remember we did an interview, which, as I remember, it went on for hours, and it was for a tiny little piece, you know, about the size of a postage stamp, but the interview went on for ages. And one of the things that I vividly remember is you telling me that you'd gone to see Genesis when Peter Gabriel was dressed as a city. I'm not quite sure how this happened, how you would do such a thing, but, and I've seen him in the Flower stuff, but a city, that's, yeah.
I think I was making a joke.
Well, I put that in the interview.
I think I was making a joke about singers in progressive rock bands coming on dressed as ridiculous things, and the idea that someone would come on dressed as a city. I don't think literally came on dressed.
Well, it went in the piece as a direct quote. So maybe that's why the editor was mad at me. What were you talking about? But you were unashamedly into those bands as well as what else.
Well, I never understood. I mean, I wrote about this in my book. I never understood. I remember the day I went to secondary school, high school, being in shock because I became aware of this notion of musical tribes, which I'd never been conscious of. So there were kids that only listened to the Jam and Peter Paul. There were the kids that only listened to the heavy metal bands. There were the kids that only listened to the two-tone bands. And I just thought it was all amazing. And I didn't understand that idea that you were only allowed to align yourself with one musical tribe. And of course, naively, I didn't get that in those early days either. So I would be talking about Pink Floyd and Aphex Twin.
Yeah. But that's what made the music fantastic. And actually, in a weird sort of way, you were ahead of the game, because that is how people listen to music now. All that tribalism thing doesn't really exist anymore. It's been gradually demolished, and you know, now you can admit to liking all sorts of stuff. You know, and I went through that same. I remember a period when I was about 12 and getting into punk and stuff, and just like going through my record collection and getting rid of things. You know, like Billy Don't Be a Hero by Paper Lacing. It was
classic on the bus stop label. I had it too.
It's a fantastic record, and I got rid of it. What was I thinking? I loved that record. Summertime City by Mike Batt of the Wombles. One of the greatest records ever made, and I got rid of that. Awful thing. All that kind of, you know, divisioning.
The Year Zero thing, yeah.
I think Porcupine Tree, and to an extent No Man as well, did break that down. And then
clearly we didn't, because we did, you know, we were like that, but we got pretty much ostracised by the mainstream music press once they figured that out about us. So I don't think we did do that.
But the fans seem to have seen beyond that, don't they? And the fans that have kept coming, and initially, you know, 3 people in a pub becomes 30 people in a pub, becomes 300 people, and you end up at the Royal Albert Hall. One thing that's always amazed me when you look back at the history of the group, you know, you start with this bedroom project, then there's a point where you become, I don't know whether you call it a serious group, it goes from a joke to something else. It becomes a serious project, and you start to grow and become a live band. And Richard joins. I mean, you know, you probably all know Richard as the keyboard player in Japan, who were, you know, in the 80s were one of the biggest groups in the country, really. So to get someone like that to join your band, how does that happen? And you know, what kind of, you know, I mean, it's like signing Messi for Leeds, isn't it, guys?
It's having the Gillingham Collection Club.
Yeah, it's hard to know why. I suppose my initial contact with Stephen and interest was when he was working in No Man. So that's when we first started working together. And then he had this side project that he asked me to play on, which was Up Downstairs. And I agree, to me it sounded quite like the Orb. It was quite contemporary in a way, which suited me. And I added a lot of electronics to it. We both had the same kind of love of electronic music. But yeah, then Porcupine Tree became a live band. It's hard to know. There's been some tough times.
I mean, I was talking with you about this in the car earlier. I mean, I remember in some of those early tours wondering why Richard was doing it, because it was humiliating for me doing some of those things. So I was thinking, what must it have been like for Richard? But yeah, I guess you must have seen something potential-wise in it, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think I've instinctively got a good sense, and I've been proved right.
Gavin, you came on later, because obviously the original drummer Colin left, didn't he? Chris. I'm getting mixed up with Colin. Chris Maitland, the drummer, left in 2002, I believe. Were you aware of them before that? I mean, were you aware of all this, the kind of the stick in the music press and all the rest of it?
Yeah, in 2001, because I've known Richard since about 1989, 1990.
Wow.
We worked together with an Italian singer. And then I worked a few times with Richard through the 90s, and I went on tour with Mick Carl and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, 2001, Richard said, oh look, I'm playing at Shepherd's Bush Empire with this band I'm in, Porcupine Tree. Do you want to come along? I said, yeah, sure, okay. So I went along. I was quite impressed. I mean, the whole downstairs was full, and they were playing pretty weird music. And after an hour, I sent them a text saying, I'm not feeling well, I'm going home, right? I thought I'd had enough of this. I didn't know any of it. I didn't know any of the music at all. And it was enough to hear. Probably 40 minutes was enough, actually. No, but when you don't know anything about it, let's say 30 minutes. When you don't know anything about it, you don't know any of the songs. I mean, I was impressed they were playing such sort of, left field music, uncommercial, non-pop music, and they'd filled up the whole of downstairs at Shepherd's Bush. And I got a good impression of the band, and then, I said to my girlfriend, now let's go. So I sent Richard a text saying I wasn't feeling well. Anyway, the following February or so, Richard called me and said, you know that band that you came and saw and pretended you were ill. Our drummers left very suddenly, and in about 3 weeks' time, we've got to go to New York and make a record. And I know you do sessions. Would you come along as a session drummer?
Right.
And I said, yeah, great, I'd love to. So that's how it really began for me.
Amazing.